Carolina State Board of Education. I'm Eric Davis, Chair of the Board, and I call this meeting to order. Welcome to my colleagues and advisors, staff, on-site visitors, online listeners, and Twitter followers. Please note you can follow the State Board of Education on its Twitter page at @EDStateBoard_NC. And you can follow the meeting online and see all of our materials by going to SBE meetings at www.ncpublicschools.org. For our visitors and those listening online, today's agenda involves our board discussions on agenda items, and then tomorrow's agenda is the official meeting day when the board will vote on its action items. March is Arts in Schools Month. This is a month dedicated to arts education and gives our education community an opportunity to appreciate the importance that arts education plays in the education of all our students. In addition, tomorrow is Read Across America Day, an annual event celebrated on or near March 2nd as a nationwide reading celebration to promote literacy and encourage the love of reading among our children. We look forward to acknowledging that annual event tomorrow. Also delighted to thank and welcome local superintendents who are with us today and tomorrow. We appreciate your service and dedication to students across our state. I understand that Dr. Charles Baldwin of Macon County Schools and Dr. Aaron Woody of Asheboro City Schools, in addition to, Dr. Chris Baldwin, thank you, of Macon County Schools and Dr. Aaron Woody of Asheboro City Schools, join our own Valerie Bridges being here today. If you're a local superintendent, could you stand so we could recognize you? Board members, you're reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Board members, you received the agenda last week and had the opportunity to review it. I ask if there's any requests for changes. Hearing none, I request a motion for approval of the March 1st and 2nd, 2023 State Board of Education meeting. Motion by Mr. Blackburn. Is there a second? Second by Ms. White. Dr. Petrie Martin.
Dr. Oxendine.
Yes.
Mrs. Kamnitz.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan. Mr. Hull.
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers. Mrs. White.
Yes.
Mr. Blackburn.
Yes.
Dr. Ford. Treasurer Falwell. Lieutenant Governor Robinson. Vice Chair Duncan.
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes. Motion carries. We have an agenda. We'll now proceed to our student learning and achievement discussions led by Ms. Jill Kamnitz. Ms. Kamnitz.
Thank you, Chair Davis. This morning we have we recognize my Vice Chair, Dr. Lydia Oxendine. I almost forgot, but that's very important. We share this work. We have two items of new business this morning. The first one is our regularly scheduled K-12 Science and Healthful Living Standards update, Dr. Day.
Good morning. We are here to bring you updates on our revision process for K-12 Science and Healthful Living. We'll start off with the first slide as a reminder of the State Board Policy SCOS 012. That's our policy that guides our review and revision process for all of our content areas. The next slide has our internal procedures manual, which gives details into that process. And so pages 17 through 22 will give you the details of where we are for both science and healthful living. So for science, we have several completed actions. It's been a very busy month for the team and for the writers. The Data Review Committee, the DRC, completed their review and analysis of their feedback from Draft 1. So Draft 1 went out for feedback. Data came in. The DRC completed their conclusions and recommendations. So that report went over to the standards writing team, which is a separate team of educators who work on those standards. The SWT met in person on February 6th to review the recommendations and then began their work of editing and revising Draft 1 of the proposed standards to develop Draft 2. And so draft 2, the proposed 2023 K-12 science standards, was released last week on Thursday for one final round of feedback from the field. So we go through 3 drafts, and we are to the point where after draft 2, that survey closes, which is a much more general survey, asking about vertical alignment, concise, are they clear to read, those types of questions. They'll come back, the data will come back and go back to the DRC. They'll create their report, and then it'll go back to the writers, and they will create draft 3. So for the next section, we're going to walk through some of the process from draft 1 to draft 2 and what that data looked like coming back from draft 2. And I'm going to let Dr. Charles Aiken, Section Chief for Science, Math, and STEM, walk us through that.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chairman Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Truitt, all of our audience. Actually, Dr. Day took all my talking points, so I think I'm done. I can't follow that. We are very excited to be here. I do want to make sure I take this opportunity to thank. We have an amazing K-12 science team. We have nearly 70 teachers, administrators, educators from across the state that are working very diligently on this process. And as Dr. Day said, they work in 2 separate groups. We do that with some intention. And I also just want to thank everyone out there who has participated in the surveys. That information is critical, and I hope in a second we can kind of show how we use that. Like Dr. Day said, we follow the exact same process for drafting draft 2 that we did for draft 1. The survey for the first round of draft proposed standards was released in November and then closed later in December. It provided both quantitative and qualitative feedback. It looked exactly the same as our first survey that went out. Participants were allowed to provide feedback on each individual objective. They could indicate they thought it was fine and to keep it. They could say it needed additional modifications, or they could say they thought it should be just removed. And then they could give some additional comments for each one. And at the end of each grade level or course, they could also just give us overall feedback. And all of that information was used. I do want to also thank our colleagues in the Office of Learning and Recovery. They provide some very helpful process in being able to go through that very large data set. The first thing we do upon receiving that information back from OLR is we convene our data review committee. This time that was done virtually. Each consultant meets with their assigned grade span or course. We provide them the information, and then we really just step back and they go through the process. That was each day for each of the grade spans or the courses, and then they had about an additional week and a half to refine and kind of keep processing through their recommendations and conclusions. Then on February 6th, we did meet with our writing team here in Raleigh. That was a full day in person, and then they also continued for about another week to meet virtually as needed to continue kind of crafting what they thought the next round of the draft standards should be. So just real quick in terms of thinking about some of the quantitative data, overall we had 4,383 responses from the all stakeholder one. Just to remind everyone, there are 2 surveys that went out, both for back in the summer and then for the proposed draft 1 standards. One is an all stakeholder one, which any stakeholder in the state of North Carolina can respond to, whether that's a parent, a teacher, a student, educators, our members, our colleagues in higher ed, anyone can respond to that. There's also one that goes specifically to our public school units with our LEAs and charter schools. And on that version, what we asked them to do is convene a team, in this case a representative of their science teachers, to kind of give us a sense collectively as a group what they think. So we take both of those. For our PSUs, we had a total of 915 responses, which covered 76 of the PSUs. We had just a slight fewer PSUs, but we had more responses. So they were able to complete more of the various grade levels and courses. One thing, and I have a graph in a second that I'm going to show you that we were very excited about, is that overall, when we looked at the 3 choices to keep an objective, to modify it, or to remove it, none of the grade levels averaged below 75% keep as proposed in draft 1. So we were very excited about that. And the other thing that we noticed was really the feedback from both the all stakeholder and the PSU surveys were very similar in nature. So the next slide is a kind of a representation of, and I apologize, it's a little small on the screen. I'll try to walk through it. One of the things that the Office of Learning and Recovery was able to do for us is they were able to give us a chart that broke down, or a series of tables that broke down each grade level. And then within each grade level, it told us, okay, for all the objectives listed, what was your rate of keep, modify, or remove? And they look very similar to this. What we wanted to present for the board really is we took an average of each of those and what was the average rate. And one of the things that we're really excited about was that none of them on either the PSU or the All-Staker had anything less than 75% as an average. Certainly within grade levels, we might have some that were 100% keep, and then we would have some that were lower than that, but the average was very high. The other thing I think you'll notice is that really the results are pretty similar across the two. Both overall, if you were to average kindergarten all the way down through our high school courses, each averaged over 80% as a total. So we were very excited about that. So this is kind of an example of the quantitative data. In addition to that, we also received qualitative analysis from OLR, which is the next slide. And what they were able to do for us is they looked at all the objectives and all the feedback from both the stakeholder and the PSU. And then they gave us the top 5 objectives that had the most feedback regarding to either modify or remove. And then from that, they looked at the comments to try to give us some ideas of, okay, what was it about those 5 in each that had people suggesting to make some kind of change, modify, or remove. So this was another piece of the qualitative aspect that our DRC utilized. And then in addition to this, our DRC actually really goes through as many lines of comments as you possibly can. And on the next slide, one of the things that we can kind of see is some of the themes that kind of came out. We ended up grouping the themes in two sections. So one section, which is what this slide has for you, is kind of those comments directly related to the draft standards and objectives. And there were definitely some things that we noticed that we tried to address. One was that because the standards are initially written by grade level and by course, you naturally have chances where some of the language isn't necessarily consistent on the first draft. Our reviewers definitely noticed that. There were always a couple times where, depending on the language, they said we really need some additional clarification. What do you really mean by that particular skill or concept? We continue to get some suggestions for refining where the content happened to be. Sometimes, hey, we think it should be 3rd grade, or we think it should be 4th grade. So we continue to get some feedback on that. And then the other thing that we saw was, as we worked to embed the science and engineering practices, we continue to get the feedback on which practice might be best for that particular skill or concept. So that was kind of those qualitative themes that came for the standards themselves. There was a second group of themes that we pulled from there, or the DRC pulled, which were really feedback more on what happens once we have our standards in place. And so we felt it was important to share these because we thought these were really critical. Some of these may kind of show up in the second round of the draft standards, but a lot of it are ones that we sort of recorded, and we definitely wanted people to know we heard this, and these will be part of our planning process once we have new standards in place. Some of those included boundary statements, which sort of guide teachers on how far into a skill or concept do I need to go. That was something that we heard very clearly in the feedback, and we're beginning to have, once we have our standards set, we will definitely make sure that is a piece of what is shared. We already kind of knew, and it was reaffirmed in the survey data, that continuing to build comfort and capacity related to the science and engineering practices. We kind of knew that was going to be there. People have asked for, hey, once you have some things settled, can you make sure to give us some specific examples of what this might look like? A very understandable and reasonable request. And then, of course, just in general, knowing that we will need professional development both for our teachers and obviously our instructional coaches, science leads, on the practices, continuing revise Bloom's taxonomy, and just how to support any of the supporting documents that were going to come out. So we wanted to make sure we noted these because we wanted to make sure that people heard. We see it, we're planning on it, we're already building it for starting in the summer. And so what sort of happens next? The survey was released, as Dr. Day said, last Thursday. It will stay open until 11:59 p.m. on March 26th. It's a Sunday. And then we will, as Dr. Day said, we'll kick the process up again. We will turn the data over to our colleagues in OLR to try to crunch some of the initial data for us. We'll bring back the data review committee for we're thinking about a week to a week and a half, and then we'll bring the writing team back, and they will again do the same kind of process again. So we definitely encourage anyone listening, and to all of our stakeholders, please participate. The information that we glean from these surveys is absolutely critical. So I think I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Day.
And that was science, and now we'll talk about Healthful Living. The timeline's a little different. Healthful Living's a couple months behind them because of a delay at the beginning. But for Healthful Living completed actions, the DRC report has been completed, and it's been provided to the writing team. The writing team met at the beginning of February and had their orientation and kickoff, so they are working currently on that first draft. So our next steps, they will complete that first draft of the proposed health. So we have two sets of standards going on here. So we've got the health education standards and the physical education standards. That draft 1 will be released hopefully by the end of March for feedback. So it's the same process that science is going through, just a couple months behind. And then we will come forward next month for a presentation for the board on that first draft. And similar to what we did with science a few months ago, we will bring a DRC member and an SWT member to explain their process and their thinking and how they got to draft 1. And that's it for our update.
Any questions for Dr. Day?
This is fascinating work. I just love to hear about standards and being developed and all the steps that go along with it. A couple of questions about the high rate of keep the objective. Could that suggest then that LEAs will not need to expend a lot of resources on new materials such as textbooks, ancillary material that go along with materials that go along with textbooks?
Could be.
How do those two areas, textbook standards, how do they coincide?
It could be. The textbook process will take place, I believe, usually during installation, if not first year of implementation, where the agency goes through their process with textbooks. And a part of that is looking at the alignment of standards within those materials and how publishers make those adjustments. And I'll let Dr. Aiken add if you'd like. We would say that maybe the largest piece that they would need PD on or some alignment would be with those scientific and engineering practices to make sure their materials are matching with that.
Yes, ma'am. Really from the beginning, even our very first round of surveys that came out, one of the things that came back was there was not a strong desire by either our stakeholders or the PSUs to make any dramatic changes in content. There certainly has been movement between grade levels, and sometimes even within a grade level where you might see an objective has changed. There never really was a strong, overwhelming desire in the feedback to completely redo what the content is. Whether the district, it would really depend on what the district has purchased and to what degree they've done something. And because each district can choose, it's a little hard to tell for exactly how each individual district may be impacted. But I think the feedback has also shown what Dr. Day just said, which is what we can see is really spreading the use of those science and engineering practices and really helping think about using the science and what we kind of mean through that is probably where we're going to see the greatest emphasis, certainly in professional development. But to the question of how much districts may financially have to put in will probably largely depend on kind of how they've approached it in the past, I think.
Thank you. And then the question is for you, my last question, Ms. Candace, if I may. The term boundary statement, fascinating. Would that be similar to the scope and sequence?
It's similar. I think the language that we would further imply, though, is one of the things that teachers often say is, okay, I understand you want me to teach this, and I see how it relates from within kindergarten to first grade to second grade. My question is, how deep into that concept do I need to go? And I think that's a lot of times where we hear frustration from teachers, and then you'll vertically hear a teacher say, well, my students already learned it, and I thought I was going to teach it. Or conversely, they'll say, I thought they were supposed to have this by now. And so that's something that we heard. We heard it in the beginning, but we were trying to get through the writing, and this time we really saw that, and we wanted to make sure that we noted that we are going to try to provide some of those clear examples of just how far into a concept.
That is really good to hear.
It was good feedback.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I had a question about slide 10, where it talked about the specific examples for clarification, and I guess that goes to what you were just saying as well. I just wanted to be clear, when we talk about the specific examples for clarification, you're talking about the standards and not the unpacking document?
Correct. So the reason we sort of put these in two is we had one set where they were saying, in terms of what you've actually presented us, we think you need to further refine the language within that particular objective. There was also a trend in the data that said, regardless of where you end up, what we think is, as a refinement to the materials that we've had, we would want you to make sure that in the supporting or unpacking documents, you continue to try to give us some clarity about what that looks like, how I might assess it. That is definitely something that we've heard as well. What is the student doing? What should I be doing? So it definitely overlaps, but I wanted to bring it out because one was definitely, hey, this objective, we want more clarity. And then there was, when you get to rolling stuff out, please make sure that you continue that process of identification.
So it will be on both documents is basically what you're saying. It will be the standards will be clear in that regard, as well as the unpacking document with, I'm gonna be honest, as a teacher, that's my baby, the unpacking document, so I can understand what the writers and what people were thinking, so that I can teach it properly.
That is our goal.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for those good clarifying questions.
Those were, yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you next month.
Yes, ma'am.
Our second item of new business is going to be a lot of fun, I think. As Chair Davis mentioned, March is Arts in Our Schools Month, and perfect time to hear about our new arts education graduation requirement that we have started this year. And so we're going to hear a little bit about that, but then we're going to hear from the people who that requirement actually affects their education. So this is going to be fun. Dr. Carlin.
Good morning, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Truitt, members and advisors to the board. My name is Lori Carlin, and it is my honor to serve as the Section Chief for Social Studies and Arts Education. I'm joined by our Arts Education team, Sayward Grinley and Brandon Rader, and our special guests. It is my pleasure to be here today as we begin and celebrate Arts in Our Schools Month. Today, we are pleased to share updates on the comprehensive arts education and the arts education graduation requirement. We are also joined by some special guests who will briefly share their celebrations and experiences in the arts in North Carolina schools. We begin with updates on comprehensive arts education. State Law 2010-34 implemented the three-legged stool of arts education. The three components of this work include arts education, arts integration, and arts exposure. Additionally, the arts education graduation requirement, State Law 2020-78, and included in Grad 004 policy, was implemented in 2022 for tracking for the 9th grade class of 2025. Both initiatives were included in the JLOC report submitted to the General Assembly with your approval in December. As we welcome our guests, Sayward and Brandon will share some of the many, many ways that our arts education students exemplify the components of Portrait of a Graduate. I'd like to introduce you to our first guest, Michelle Burrows. Michelle serves as the Executive Director of A+ Schools, one of our fabulous partners in our comprehensive arts education efforts. Michelle?
Thanks, Lori, and good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Burrows, Director of A+ Schools of North Carolina. As a signature program of the North Carolina Arts Council, we work with schools across the state to become more creative and engaging places to teach and learn. I'm honored to be able to speak for a few moments about comprehensive arts education to help kick off Arts in Our Schools Month. I want to take you back to 2010 as A+ Schools was transitioning from UNC Greensboro and seeking a new home. It was a collaborative effort between the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, the North Carolina Arts Council, and the Department of Public Instruction that landed A+ Schools in our new home at the Arts Council. And this multi-partner collaboration continued that year into the work of the Comprehensive Arts Education Task Force to help define a vision of comprehensive arts education and set goals for how to achieve this vision together. Now, 13 years later, there are two big takeaways I want to mention from that important work of the Comprehensive Arts Education Task Force. The first is that comprehensive arts education includes all three of those components that Dr. Carlin just mentioned: arts education, arts integration, and arts exposure. It's not an either or. You either get an arts education or maybe you get some arts exposure, but rather that all three of those components are required for a comprehensive arts education. And all of our kids deserve all three types of arts learning. The second takeaway is that when we declare that all of our students deserve a comprehensive arts education, we know that DPI can't make that happen alone. There are other partners who can help, and A+ Schools and the North Carolina Arts Council are proud to be two of these partners. As a matter of fact, over the last 10 years, the North Carolina Arts Council has awarded over 1,000 grants and more than $10 million in grant funds to support arts education and arts integration experiences for students and educators across our state. And A+ Schools of North Carolina has a thriving and growing network of 67 pre-K through 12th grade schools in 37 LEAs across our state who receive ongoing development that supports comprehensive arts education. And we know that creative and engaging arts-based teaching and learning works when an A+ school like W.A. Bess Elementary in Gaston County is named a 2022 National Blue Ribbon School, and an A+ charter school like Arts-Based Charter in Buncombe County is named a 2022 National Elementary and Secondary Education Act Distinguished School. I know I speak for my colleagues at the North Carolina Arts Council and our staff at A+ Schools of North Carolina when I tell you how excited and grateful we are to have this lasting mandate for collaboration that grew out of the joint work of the Comprehensive Arts Education Task Force. And we look forward to our continued work together to support arts learning for our students across the state, not only during Arts in Our Schools Month, but every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning. My name is Sayward Grindley, and I am part of the arts education team here at DPI. I serve as the K-12 Dance and Visual Arts Consultant. It has been an absolute pleasure seeing the wonderful work of the students and teachers in arts education across our state over the past 3 years. As you know, the competencies and durable skills outlined in the superintendent's portrait of a graduate are keys to creating successful career-ready students. They include adaptability, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, empathy, a learner's mindset, and personal responsibility. Adaptability is the ability to adjust to new or different situations and conditions. We've all had to do that over the last 3 years. We all have to do this every day in our lives. Couldn't we have used a little bit more practice when we were younger, really honing in on that skill so that we were prepared as adults? Artists do this every day when creating anything. When something doesn't go their way, or they need to adjust for space, materials, time, various abilities, skill levels, or even for injuries. They also do this when collaborating with others that may have artistic differences or differences in opinion. Collaboration, which is inherent in all artistic disciplines, allows students to learn to work together and understand that they are part of a larger whole. By working with others and being open to various perspectives, students then strengthen their empathy and grow. And growing leads to a learner's mindset, which is a perspective that views every experience as an opportunity for growth. So not just the good experiences, but also those with setbacks, obstacles, and even the unknown. Arts education experiences such as the ability to create without a preconceived notion, or by working with obstacles instead of against them, provides an opportunity for students to practice facing challenges, taking risks, figuring out solutions, and teaches them the value of process over product. I am pleased to introduce our next guest speaker for today, Sydney Potter, who is a former North Carolina student, a graduate of the dance education program from Meredith College, and now a first-year teacher in the North Carolina Public Schools. Ms. Potter will share how she and her students have demonstrated and cultivated all of these competencies from the portrait of a graduate within the environment she has created in her program.
Hello, my name is Sydney Potter, and I'm the dance director at Apex Friendship High School. I'm also a first-year teacher, and I'm here today to speak on why I chose to go into public school arts education and the impact I have seen in my first year teaching high school dance. Ever since I could remember, dance has been my passion. In my early education, it was my favorite way to make connections across other disciplines I was studying, when other classes did not always come easy to me. Dance education helped me to understand the climate of society in the 20th century, or the definition of force and gravity of movement as it relates to physics. It also taught me interpersonal skills, like how to effectively collaborate and communicate with peers, to be vulnerable in my creativity, to take risks, to problem solve, to fail, and to succeed. I am the person I am today because of the traits I have acquired through dance education, and I'm a proud public school dance teacher because I believe in the power of arts to make a difference in the lives of students, because it did for me. Reflecting on my first year, I am overwhelmed by the creativity and ambition of the students I have the privilege to work with daily. As a first-year teacher, you have no choice but to jump in 100% and cross your fingers that you're successfully delivering instruction and making connection for all students, all while trying to promote a collaborative, supportive classroom community, making sure everyone is safely taking class, and the 500 other things I have to attend to on a daily. But thankfully, dance taught me to be adaptable. By prioritizing relationships and acknowledging my students as people first, students second, classroom community came fairly quick. I was able to witness 2 beginning dance classes, all different backgrounds and dance experience, find commonality through dance, and create beautiful new friendships. As the semester progressed, we began to prepare for our showcase. Each beginning dance class had 2 dances to be performed. As the date neared, things got serious, and I loved watching my students hold their peers accountable when they noticed the class getting off track. I knew I hit the mark when my students were doing my job for me and helping their peers stay focused and motivated. The process of students working together towards something bigger than themselves is inspiring to be a part of. It did not happen overnight, but trusting the process is key. Another thing I've learned through dance. The culmination of my first semester playing out at our winter showcase brought me to tears. 15 dances, 84 students, all unique and working together to produce meaningful and thought-provoking work. I had a conversation with my advanced students the other day about how privileged we are to have arts and dance in schools, because some students would not have the opportunity otherwise. As part of our conversation, they disclosed to me that it is their safe space, a break in their day to truly express themselves, to be a part of a process that encourages them to take risks and understand that trial and error is necessary for growth, and to just be able to simply move together. I'm truly grateful for the position I've been given, the impact that I know dance will have on my students for years to come, and for the opportunity to speak here today. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Brandon Rader, and I am the other half of the arts education team, and I represent music and theater arts. I would like to just take a moment to share the ways that arts touch on communication, critical thinking, and personal responsibility. But first, I want to thank Superintendent Truitt for her beautiful and touching message that she sent out this morning in celebration for Arts in Our Schools Month. Every ensemble, whether music or an acting troupe, a behind-the-scenes stage crew, or the dance team, a collaborative arts group, they all must quickly learn to communicate well in order to work together to make something that is better than just the individual. It's impossible to put on Hello Dolly or to play a symphonic work by yourself, after all. The personal responsibility demanded from each individual member to contribute to the whole during the school day is unlike that which is demanded of them in any other content area. It is only by showing up as your best self on each and every day that the group succeeds. With this responsibility is also the demand to think critically about the work that each group is partaking in. Critical thinking and problem solving is essential for these artists as they use multimodal skills to represent new ideas, old stories, differing viewpoints, and overcoming the challenges of difficult and rigorous demands on both their mental and physical abilities. It is through music that our 2 next speakers hone their durable skills, leading them into the colleges of their choices. Please welcome our guests from Oxford Preparatory Academy in Granville County, who will share more about their journey in music education.
Good morning. My name is Alexis Wilson, and I am a senior at Oxford Preparatory High School. Throughout my entire academic career, music has played an essential role in my learnings and has only benefited my future endeavors. From elementary school to middle school to high school, I have taken every opportunity to participate in music classes, ensembles, choirs, and handbell groups. As a senior this year, I found myself scrambling to remember everything I've ever involved myself in for the sake of my college resume and the application process. When all was said and done, I found a commonality in my resume, application, extracurriculars, and even my essays. Music. Music was my thing, and it was the core of my application. You could see it through my transcript with all the music classes I've taken, and you could see it in my lived experience essay, you could see it in my extracurriculars, and you could see it in my honors and my awards. I will be attending Duke University this coming fall as the class of 2027. I plan to obtain my PhD in clinical psychology, followed by a music therapy certification. To say the least, this is a dream come true to me. While this may sound cliche, I wouldn't have been able to do this without my musical background and experience. At my high school, seniors are required to do what we call a senior project. For my senior project, I chose to explore the benefits of music therapy. I went to a local nursing home and sang Christmas carols to the patients. I then interviewed 4 previously chosen patients of all 4 different medical conditions. I asked them questions about their life and about how music has and still continues to affect and benefit them. The results were astounding. Every patient stated that music was more than a sound to them. Some use music for healing purposes, while others use it for coordination purposes. My patient that suffered a stroke especially emphasized how much music has not only benefited her mental health, but her physicality as well. Music classes in schools today are not merely electives, but are essential to one's learning. Take it from me, I've learned so much in just one round of interviews. While singing or playing instruments with friends may be fun, the benefit of music classes do not stop there. From learning rhythm patterns that help with coordination, to learning about cultural traditions that music has unified, to being able to share a place with others to express an emotion in a way that is sacred, and to teach a new way of communication, music is abundant. It's a language, one that entertains, teaches, encourages, and even heals. I could only hope that future North Carolina students are able to experience music in their schools in the way that I did. Music has made my dreams come true, and I have my school system to thank for the opportunities I was given to do so. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Holly Curran, a senior at Oxford Preparatory High School in Granville County. One reason I have loved my small rural public charter school is that it has a focus on the arts, offering classes in choir, band, strings, visual arts, and theater. There is so much participation and support for the arts at Oxford Prep, which has helped progress and drive the program even further. Overall, being able to have an arts education has impacted my life as a student in so many ways. Personally, I have been involved in both the concert choir and high school band for all 4 years of high school. My involvement in these groups has helped me not only explore my passion for music, but also keep me active in my school and community. Trium Music Honor Society has allowed me and others who also have a passion for music to participate in events within our school as well as in our community. These include singing in the nursing home, singing the national anthem at the Durham Bulls game, attending symphony concerts, watching local plays and musicals, and even attending the ballet. Participating in the arts at Oxford Prep also just makes school exciting. Because of choir and band, I look forward to going to school every day, and it's so cool to explore the ins and outs of music and collaborate with your peers to create something so beautiful and complex that you can share with others. I know that I am needed in these performing groups, and that gives me a sense of purpose as a music student. While I was in 10th grade, I decided to apply to the North Carolina School of Science and Math. I considered this school because I also have a passion for science and mathematics. However, I had to weigh my options and figure out if I wanted to apply for the residential or online program. I eventually decided to apply for the online program, allowing me to dual enroll and take a few online classes while also still attending Oxford Prep. While I'm sure NCSSM has wonderful music opportunities, I felt a want inside of me to stay at Oxford Prep. I knew if I had left 2 years early, I would truly miss the music program that I found myself just getting started in. I also wasn't quite ready to leave my local dance studio, which I have been a part of for almost 15 years. The art of dance has also been an important and impactful part of my life. It has taught me so many things and allowed me to express myself further. I also knew that Oxford Prep has so many great opportunities academically as as well, which has played a factor in my decision to stay. As far as my future goes, I was accepted and will most likely attend UNC Chapel Hill in the fall to major in pharmacy. I am always thankful for how the arts at Oxford Prep have shaped me and led me to success. I am so glad I got to share a little bit about how my arts education at my school has impacted me, and I can proudly say that music and the arts will always have a role in my life no matter what. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our guests for sharing their experiences and their celebrations of arts in our schools. In celebration of these aspects of arts education, that we herald March as Arts in Our Schools Month and congratulate all of the arts education teachers and student artists for their hard work and dedication as they showcase the mastery of the standard course of study throughout this month. And we invite you all to join us for performances in the lobby throughout the month of March, and there is additional artwork down there now, so we hope that you will enjoy and celebrate with us and our students. Thank you so much.
If there was ever any doubt in anyone's mind in this room, which I sort of suspect there was not, but we now know from these three students the critical nature that art education plays in the lives of our students every day, and how much I celebrate the fact that we have decided to make sure that arts has a place in every student's education. So wonderful work there. Thank you all. Any questions for any of our students or presenters?
No question, Madam Chair, but just to ditto, so I was sitting there thinking how music, I believe in music education. I grew up in Northeast North Carolina, but music, it's like a magic wand. And create a dance. It crosses languages, nations, cultures, you name it. Music is an ambassador to open doors worldwide, and I'm just so proud of these young people and seeing it like that as we look forward. People who dance in China has the same rhythm that people who dance in Northeast North Carolina. It's the same thing, that love for that particular amount, and I commend all that you participate in, because it is a character building approach to life. And I thank you for presenting this morning. I thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak. I just go back to those 10th grade, 8th, 7th, and 9th grade programs that we used to hold every Friday on stage.
Society.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ms. White.
So, Wendell, I completely agree with you. Music was my foundation and still is the anchor for my heart. And we spend so much time talking about student test scores and the evaluation of the success of North Carolina's public schools based on a score. And every child has a gift or a talent, and every child may not be gifted in mathematics or in science. But arts education is a way for students across our state to tap into their gifts and their talents. That if you talk about transferable skill, the things that they learn through arts education is the platform for success in career pathways. Making sure that we continue to offer that to every student across our state is critical. And I wish all of those who are critical about what we're doing in our state schools could see students performing as a group through dance or theater or music and recognize that amazing things are going on with our students. So thank you for all of the work and to every arts educator across our state that pours into their students. It makes my heart sing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that, and we agree wholeheartedly. And it's one of the reasons that we decided to base our presentation around the Portrait of a Graduate, because so many, all of those pieces, those elements of Portrait of a Graduate are represented every single day in arts education.
Good. Go
see, I will start with Dr. Oxendine.
This will take, start
Yeah,
counting,
quickly,
10
because we do
seconds.
need to keep moving.
Whole child, we talk about it all the time. So here we go, the whole child. Such a perfect example of that. And then my other question is, it would be great to know, and maybe you do know, Dr. Carlin, what the LEAs are doing to showcase this week. Are you keeping
Oh, sure. Yeah, we'll be happy to celebrate that through social media, and we sort of amplify those voices throughout the month and all year.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Everybody that's spoken has kind of taken a lot of wind out of my sail, but I too have always admired people that were talented musically and in other ways. Never been able to play an instrument, never been able to sing, but I appreciated it so much and I enjoyed it so much. And it makes me think of how many students in a high school cannot perform athletically, but how many you see sitting in the stands cheering the team on. And that's what we need to do for our art students and our music programs. We need to have those people that aren't particularly talented in those areas learning by it and cheering it on as well. And the whole person idea, it's so true. I can't imagine enjoying life as much as I do if it were not for music and other arts type programs and the theater and so forth. I did not appreciate or enjoy dance recitals until being a middle school principal, one of the students bought a ticket and come and asked me to attend their recital. And I did, and gave me goosebumps to see my students performing even in something I couldn't do and had absolutely no talent in. So yes, it's important, and I think it's important not only to the participants, but also a school within itself or a community, and it makes them part of that community.
Thank you so much. A quote, since I have to represent the social studies side as well, there's a Winston Churchill quote that I'm going to really mangle, but it's the Parliament suggested cutting arts and music and theater and all of those things during the war so that they had more funding for tanks and so forth. And Winston Churchill responded and said, what are we fighting for if we don't have those things? So, thank you.
I'm going to let Superintendent finish out the conversation quickly, and then we'll move on.
Oh, I think I can forgo my time. I think our student advisor has a comment.
Oh, okay.
I also just wanted to say that I'm not even very talented in music at all, but one of my favorite memories from elementary and middle school is chorus and the time that was taken out of our day every single week to just learn about music and the amount of cultures that we learned about just being in that class. And I met my best friend through my chorus class in third grade, and we've been best friends ever since. And one of the biggest things we connect through is music, even though the both of us know absolutely nothing about the details or the work that goes into it. But I mean, we all the artists that we connect to. It's incredible, and I mean, I've learned so much about my Hispanic culture just through music that my parents have taught me. So I mean, it's incredible, and I think that every student should have the opportunity to just learn through music.
Perfect way to close out the discussion. Thank you. Let's see. We have two action items. The first one is SLA 1, which is the Every Student Succeed update. Dr. Howard is going to briefly remind us of this adjustment in our S plan.
Yes, thank you and good morning. So a brief reminder, this is an amendment to the U.S. Department of Education requesting to have the same allowance for the 2022-23 school year that we did in 2021-22 through the addendum process. It is not available this year. We have to do an amendment, and that process is to use current year membership for high school participation for NC Math 1, NC Math 3, Biology, and English 2. And this is an ongoing impact from the pandemic. And in our amendment request to the U.S. Department of Education, we are affirming that we will not ask for this allowance next year, that this would be the last year for that. We are required to do public comment, which we did for 30 days. We had 10 comments. 3 were virtually no comment. 6 were in favor, and we did have 1 comment that was opposed based on the opinion that we should be beyond the pandemic at this point. So with that, I conclude my remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Any questions on this? All right, SLA 2 is a report to the General Assembly on career and technical education credential data. I don't know if Dr. Cross is here. Is there anyone speak to this briefly? Any changes or amendments to this?
Good morning. No, ma'am, we've had no requests for changes and no questions.
I've heard none from the board, so thank you very much.
Awesome.
We will be voting on this tomorrow. We have one discussion item, which is SLA 3, high school accreditation recommendations. Dr. Howard can come back and quickly remind us we do this every year, so
Yes, we do.
This process.
Yes, thank you. And we're bringing forth 12 schools to be recommended to be accredited. Those 12 schools have been vetted by a cross-office team within the department looking at their information individually as schools. You can see on the screen here is one of the matrices for A.C. Reynolds High School. Each recommended school has a similar matrix that you can look at their information over the past few years, which was the basis for the recommendation to move forward with accreditation for these schools.
Any questions on this for Dr. Howard? Hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Howard.
Thank you.
Finally, we have one consent item, which is SLA 4, report to the General Assembly on cursive and multiplication tables. This is an annual report that lists the compliance of each local school administrative unit with requirements regarding cursive writing and the memorization of multiplication tables. That concludes the student learning and achievement.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. We'll now turn to the Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools discussion led by Ms. Amy White. Ms. White.
Good morning, Chair Davis and board members. I'm Amy White, and I chair the Education, Innovation, and Charter School Committee, along with Ms. Jill Kamnitz. And so my iPad is being a little slow this morning. The first item for discussion is the reconsideration of the 2022 Standard Timeline Charter School application. And before us today is the Heritage Collegiate Leadership Academy of Wake County. Board members, if you will remember, last month we unanimously voted to not to approve that application. And because of charter school law, that particular application was sent back to the Charter School Advisory Board, and the Charter School Advisory Board had a chance to review the application and send back a recommendation to us. Their recommendation this month is that we approve by a vote of 6-1, and so that application is before us for discussion today. I do have some comments to make, but I want to make sure that I offer board members around the table an opportunity to ask any question or make any comments that they would like before we make our recommendation.
Just one quick question. The vote that was
Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you. The vote that was taken 6-1, is that consistent with the previous vote?
It is.
Thank you.
Give or take an absence at the Charter School Advisory Board during the vote, but yes.
Very good. Thanks.
Any other comments from board members before I read a statement? Vice Chair Duncan.
It's really not a comment, it's a question. Did the Charter School Advisory Board offer any reasoning or rationale behind their bringing this back?
Ms. Beccaro?
They did. They spoke to the fact that they were evaluating the application on its merits and feeling like the board that was presented was strong, and that the board chair and the potential school leader had learned lessons from her previous experience running a school in Bertie County. Although I will say that one of the board members did change his vote from previously he had voted to support the application, and then he decided not to, and I think that was part I think that was due to the fact that the presentation by the board was focused perhaps too much on past experiences and not focused on the application in front of them.
I'd say that sounds a lot like what we represented in the first place, but what you added at the end sounded like that was the one additional thing perhaps that came up. So thank you for that.
Any other comments or questions? So one of the things that sometimes happens in between board meetings is that board members are asked to explain the reasoning behind their particular vote. And I just wanted to offer a statement on my recommendation last month not to approve, and put that into the record so that my colleagues would better understand, and perhaps those that are questioning why I felt strongly about this particular application. So on February the 2nd of 2023, the state board was asked to act on a recommendation from the Charter School Advisory Committee that HCLA Wake be granted a new charter. And at that meeting, if you'll remember, the state board unanimously voted not to grant the charter. So as required by state board policy, the matter was remanded back to CSAB for reconsideration, and at the CSAB February the 6th meeting, CSAB again voted to unanimously approve the charter, with no changes made to the proposed charter agreement. Today, the recommendation is back before the state board for action with the exact same charter proposal with no changes. And I really feel it's important for me to share in the record some of the background regarding Heritage Collegiate's history with a previous charter school approved by the State Board of Education. In January of 2014, Heritage Collegiate Leadership Academy was granted a charter to operate a charter school in Bertie County, North Carolina. The school did open in 2014, and throughout the operation of HCLA Bertie, the HCLA board and administration demonstrated significant difficulties with fulfilling the terms of its charter. And I just wanted to add some of those things so that you would better understand. Following a long history of repetitive warnings of poor student performance qualifying the school as a continually low-performing school, failure to comply with fiscal requirements, including the failure to file required reports and audits, failure to have the required percentage of certified teachers on staff, failure to have the required number of members for the governing nonprofit board, non-compliance with federal exceptional children's service and documentation requirements, and other violations of state and federal law or its charter as it was written. CSAB recommended in 2017, in November of 2017, that the State Board of Education approve, and we approved that, the revocation of HCLA Bertie's charter for all of these reasons. Subsequent to the time that the state board made that revocation vote in November, the HCLA Bertie was asked for and was granted an opportunity for the decision to be considered by a review panel consistent with the terms of its charter, and that panel also rendered a decision in December of 2017 finding that the evidence presented supported the termination recommendation by CSAB and the vote to terminate by the State Board of Education. And so in December, a written decision by the review panel set out in significant, great detail the findings of fact supporting the decision to terminate HCLA Bertie. And that letter is part of the public record and of the specific record in the application matter that we are considering today. It has been shared with the State Board of Education as part of the consideration of the vote we must take. So why is that relevant? It's relevant because Dr. Bazemore Hall was the executive director of HCLA Bertie during the 4 years that it operated. And as such, she was responsible for the school's many failures to comply with state and federal legal requirements, charter requirements, and the directives of the Office of Charter Schools. DPI School Business Office, and the violation of the rights of students at the school to receive a sound, basic education. After the failure of the prior HCLA school, we have now before us an application of a new HCLA school with the same individual, Dr. Bazemore Hall, as the proposed chairman of the board of directors. The board of directors of a charter school is responsible under state law for overseeing and guaranteeing the legal compliance and the success of the school. During her time as executive director of HCLA at Bertie, with the fall of 2014 to the summer of 2018, Dr. Bazemore Hall showed that she was unable to properly run a successful school, to the point where the school's charter had to be revoked for malfeasance. I personally would feel irresponsible if I voted to grant Dr. Hall the opportunity to have another charter, given her opportunity to have success at a school for 4 years and her failure to do so. And so that is the reason that I am recommending against. My personal reason, I cannot speak for board members across the table, but I thought it was important that we get those findings of fact into the record. And that is the reason I personally cannot recommend that we approve this charter at this time. Does anyone have any question about the items articulated in the statement?
Ms. White, thank you so much for sharing that, particularly for some of us who are newer board members. History is always an interesting part of any deliberation that we will have. So I appreciate your taking the time and effort to help us, educate us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. Vice Chair Duncan.
I would like to echo those thanks. We've had some very good discussions through the years. We have not always agreed on every issue, but I have always respected your viewpoints. They've always been thoroughly researched, thoroughly thoughtful, and with a real emphasis on fairness. It's been what you've always strived, and so I very much appreciate your input for the board and have. So I again want to thank you for taking the time to so thoroughly review your thought process on this. Thank you for that.
Superintendent Truitt.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share your concerns with us in this way. I think my question is for Ms. Vaquero, if that's okay. How, in your opinion, in the role that you serve in, how did we get to what was initially a 10-0 vote to approve this application?
Well, the entire application process really. I would say that when someone enters an application into like our application process, it's evaluated by external evaluators. They are evaluating solely on what's on that application. So they may or may not know any past history. They may not, they probably have very little understanding of what has happened, within the agency regarding past schools. They are just solely looking at that application, and what's in it and the data that's presented. And then that goes to staff evaluations, and then it gets presented to CSAB. The only board that really hears from the applicants themselves is CSAB. So they are the ones that are, having more of the interpersonal, face-to-face interaction with applicants. Out of the entire process, really. Our office just tries to be an objective, technical assistance kind of in terms of providing the data to CSAB, providing the support for applicants to make sure that they understand how the process works. And then CSAB is in charge of really evaluating based on not only the application, but also the interviews.
Thank you very much.
I do have a quick question, and I agree with Ms. White. The more I've thought about this particular school and thinking back to that period of time, 2014, it's all coming back to me because I was 1 year as a state board member. So it is, I'm kind of reconstructing all of that in my mind through these discussions. My question has to do, a couple of questions. I wonder, to this kind of rhetorical, but I wonder to what extent CSAB has changed since the membership. Would you have any way of knowing that?
I do. It has changed significantly. The board has. There hasn't been a system of staggering CSAB members, which I know has been some discussion about trying to improve. Like that would certainly improve the history of board members. So over the last 2 years, I think we've had almost a complete board turnover in terms of new members.
And then the other question is, internally, does your staff make any comment about strengths, weaknesses, and I'm sure you're perfectly 100% objective, but what kind of commentary does your staff provide CSAB?
We, so staff members, the 6 consultants we have now are divided amongst the number of applications we get to do an evaluation, and that is completely, we wouldn't be looking at past information, past data on that. We look at what's in the application, resumes, background checks, those things would possibly get into backgrounds. But that's more of an objective evaluation of all the applications, and staff members are assigned different ones. And then really it's a matter of what kind of questions we get during the application process. We can provide data on, past schools if that's relevant, but usually we are just looking at the application itself.
Very good. It will be past performance that will be the critical deciding point for Olivia. Not necessarily the strength of what was in the application, but my memory of past performance. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this item? So the recommendation coming out of the committee would be to, well, not out of the committee, the recommendation before us is that we approve, and we'll take that vote tomorrow, whether or not to approve or deny. Okay, let's see. Other exciting, just scintillating topics for discussion today is, I know, listen, you gotta have a little energy, a little positivity. Exactly, and in fact, we could do the 7th inning stretch if we wanted to. My theater background tells me there's activities we can do to shake appendages and things like that, but I'll refrain. So EICS2 is KIP ENC. They came before us last month and presented through Ms. Beccaro a request to implement a weighted lottery and to amend their mission statement. Ms. Beccaro, have there been any changes to that since our discussion last month that we need to know about?
No changes, no updates.
Okay, board members, do you have questions about KIP's request to implement that lottery and the slight wording change in their mission statement? Wonderful. Okay, EIC 3 is the report to the North Carolina General Assembly. That was an amazing just presentation last month with Ms. Nehasha Coltrane and then representatives from our cooperative innovatives, the students and their leaders. Ms. Neha, welcome. And so any changes that you need to point out or reframe for us before we send this off for approval?
No, we just had one change on page 38 in a table that was requested by the Community College System Office with just some adding errors. So we got that changed, but other than that, it stands as it is.
Perfect. Who has a question about that report? I think you all agree with me that it was
We're very fortunate to have all 3 of our
good
students
stuff.
to share, so
Good
it's wonderful.
Good stuff. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's move to discussion. So EICS 4 is a request by Raleigh Oak Charter School to relocate within Wake County. Ms. Beccaro is coming forward to talk you through. So charter school law says that anytime a school requests to relocate with outside of a 5-mile radius, that they have to come back before us to tell us who, what, when, where, and why. And so Ms. Beccaro is going to walk us through the particular of this school's request.
All right, this is Raleigh Oak Charter School. They are a Waldorf model school located in Wake County. They serve K-7, approximately 300 students. They opened in 2018, and they began operations in a former shopping center, which had previously housed a charter school. A lot of times, our charter schools will start in a renovated shopping or retail area or church, and then they're looking for permanent location. So they have been on the search for land to build a permanent location. They have found land in the southeast Raleigh area, which was the original target area in the application. They are partnering or plan to partner with Performance Charter School Development to plan, build, and finance a permanent facility. The goal is to open in July 2025, so this is a couple years down the road, but of course they need to get that approval to get the building process started. It is a vacant lot in zip 27610. It's about 9 miles from the current school, and they do not have any compliance or financial issues that would cause concern for this request. Any questions?
Questions? Anyone? Yes, Vice Chair Duncan.
Just one, do we have access to what the proposed contract would be between the performance,
Charter School Development
entity and the school?
I don't have that currently. I could ask if there's some, what stage of, they're in with that, and if we could get a draft before next meeting.
Appreciate that, thank you. I'd like to just understand what the relationship would be.
As a resident of Wake County, I can share that 27610 is a densely populated area with not a lot of schools on the ground right within that zip code, and many of the students, because there's not a high availability of seats for a high-density residency, many of those students travel by bus to schools in other areas of the county. And so an opportunity for school choice with the Waldorf model serving an underserved population would be a win. So I'm excited about them having the opportunity to bring the existing school back to the zip code that they had initially intended to serve. Any other further questions about that one? You guys are doing great. So EICS 5 2023 charter school expansion requests, again required by charter school law. When schools want to expand beyond 30%, they have to come back before the Charter School Advisory Board and then to us to approve those expansions. We do have several. Ms. Vaquero, share with us who they are and by how many students they are requesting to grow.
All right, so charter schools make their annual projections in the CSADM system. It's run through school business, and that happens every year over a course of several months. If a charter school has requested to grow over 30%, that's considered a material revision, and it needs to get state board approval. Our office gets that information from school business when they make that request. The statute outlines 5 specific requirements. So if they don't meet these requirements, they're basically not able to make the request. The first is that the actual enrollment was within 10% of the max authorized for last year. So in other words, that they made a good projection for this current year last year. That there's commitments for 90% of the requested growth. Usually we see evidence through wait lists from a school or sibling information. It just kind of depends on the school. They are not currently low performing, they are not currently in financial noncompliance, and they are substantially in compliance with their charter agreement and other laws. And so we only have 3 requests this year, which is actually quite small. The first one is Clover Garden. This school operates in Alamance County. They serve K-7. They actually serve students from seven different counties. Their wait list is typically over 500. Their high school is moving to a new building, so they have additional room for elementary and middle school students. They have a very high retention rate. 95% of their students returned last year. and they have met all of the statutory requirements. So their 30% max that they could grow without a request is 891. They are requesting 980, which is a difference of 89 students and is a 43% increase. Any questions on Clover Garden?
Questions?
Unity Classical, this is a, they opened in 2017 in Mecklenburg. They serve K-7. They have been, over the last few years, they built a new facility and they've been actually constructing the third floor. So the third floor is closing in on completion, and next year they will welcome the 8th grade, which will allow them to enroll more students. They meet all the statutory requirements. They requested their 30% max was 788. They're requesting 52 students over that, which would be a 38.6 difference from this year's enrollment. Any questions on Unity Classical?
Unity Classical, anyone?
All right. We have one more. So in addition to over 30% growth, if a charter school would like to grow more than 2 grade levels in a year, they also have to ask for permission to do that if it's not in their original charter application. And in this case, we have Asheville Peak Academy. They just opened in 2021, so they're fairly new. And they are requesting to grow both grades 4th and 5th in 1 year. They originally were just going to add 4th grade. They now would like to add 2 grade levels to try to get some more siblings that have requested admission to the school into the school. Any questions with Asheville Peak?
And just for a point of clarification, their original charter, the proposed grade levels that they were going to serve at capacity is?
K through 8, yeah, at capacity. Any questions on those?
Okay, I don't see any questions. Thank you on that. Okay, board members, at your seats, we have a State Board of Education Times bestseller, and I am most quite certain that this will be placed at your bedside table so that you can do some incredible reading. So thank you to the Office of Charter Schools who put this together for us to put in your hands rather than looking at it digitally, because it's a lot of information, and then sometimes I like to flip back and forth to look at data provided for the charter school renewals before us for the 2023 year. There were, correct me, Ms. Vaccaro, but there were 38 total schools before us that went through the renewal process this year. You have divided them into several under a 10-year renewal, several under a 7-year renewal. There were no 5-year renewals, but there are many 3-year renewals. And so I do want to thank the Charter School Advisory Board, because they begin in November reviewing data, interviewing schools, giving schools an opportunity to come before them to answer questions that they might have, and it is a labor of love and accountability. And so that data that the schools have been providing to CSAB now appear before you in this document for your study and review. Ms. Vaccaro, walk us through the recommendations for this year.
Okay. Well, I would like to ask, actually, Dr. John Eldridge is here. He's going to join me. He is a CSAB member. And there... Okay. So he will be able to answer any questions that you might have about CSAB's deliberations and their recommendations. But there is a lot of data here. We tried to present it in as concise a way as possible, and then we actually have far more data than you are probably seeing, so we will be able to kind of provide some highlights on that. But we do have a total of 38 schools with charter agreements expiring at June 30th, 2023. So 36 of those schools have received recommendations from CSAB. 2 of those schools will be appearing next Monday before CSAB for final evaluation and recommendation. The CSAB evaluative timeline that you can see here just shows the process in which schools come before the CSAB, and staff provides data and compliance presentations. So this year, due to the large cohort, we've actually spread it over 5 months, and we still have 2 schools remaining. So you can see that presentations began in November. We typically have 2-day meetings during those fall months to make sure that we can get all of the applications and the renewals evaluated. And in March will be our final 2 schools. Prior to this process, our renewal process is 2 years. So 2 years prior to an end of a term. So in this case, these terms are ending in 2023, which means in 2021 we actually started working on these schools. The process includes site visits, interviews, and data reviews. Charter school renewals are governed by policy, by statute, and by administrative code. So there is one statute in particular that requires the review of charter school operations at least once prior to the expiration of its charter. From the years 2004 until 2013, original charters were actually granted for 10 years. So this batch of schools are actually some of the last schools that received a 10-year charter application as their first term, meaning they were issued one in 2013, and now it's up for its first review. Now new charters are only issued for 5 years. All right, so let's start with the 10-year placements. And we also have the renewal guidelines in here for you. Those are found in policy. And these basically help the CSAB in kind of placing a school. But I will reiterate that these are guidelines. Schools are unique, and they don't always fit neatly into one specific placement. And then one point also for this year's renewals, usually we look at the immediately preceding 3 years. You all know because of the pandemic that was not possible. So the accountability data we used was the 2018, 2019, and 2022 data. If schools wanted to present additional data, they could present that data, and we did look into some of that data, but we couldn't use it as it wasn't official accountability data. All right, so we'll start with the 10-year renewals. For a 10-year statutory renewal, it says that the state board shall grant a 10-year term to any school that meets these 3 requirements. So the first requirement is that they have no current significant compliance issues. They have financially sound audits the last 3 years, and they have been comparable to the local school administrative unit the last 3 years or have exceeded growth the previous 3 years. Comparability is in policy, and it's within 5% of the LEA composite score, so either above or below 5% is what we look for. And of the 38 schools, 14 met those 3 requirements. So we have Tiller School, Willow Oak Montessori, Pinnacle Classical Academy, North Carolina Leadership Charter Academy, Falls Lake Academy, Oxford Preparatory, this is the school which you heard the art students from this morning, Summerfield Charter Academy, Langtree Charter Academy, Queens Grant, Island Montessori, the Expedition School, Uwari Charter, Southeastern Academy, and Longleaf School of the Arts. So these 10 years were all placed due to the fact that they met those statutory requirements for a 10-year recommendation. And you have more of the data in your packet, which you can see that some of these schools are doing great things academically with their students. Any questions on the 10 years?
Questions on the 10 years? Vice Chair Duncan.
I have a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be patient with me, I apologize. But I want to do this quickly so CSAB at least has the opportunity to hear what the thoughts are. And I want to understand, academic comparability, that number is the percent over the district's composite score. Is that where that comes from?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it's within 5%, so we either look at below or above 5%.
That actually led to my second question. Is that a board policy, 5%? Is that a CSAB policy? Where does that policy come from?
It's a state board policy. It's Charter 012.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think I asked that question last year, but I couldn't remember. But I will appreciate that information. So I want to note my concerns on 10 years, just in general, and I'll use Tiller School as an example. I understand it meets the statutory criteria.
Mm-hmm.
but it's a little concerning when it hasn't met academic growth any of the years that are recorded. It's not the only one in this list. There are others who have, and there's one that exceeded it in one place. But it's, when not having met the growth criteria for 3 consecutive years and then giving a 10-year charter, is not, that creates some discomfort for this board member. I want to focus on UWARI charter for a moment, which also has not met academic growth in any of the past 3 years and has now been designated a low-performing school. And I note that for the comparable, Asheboro City was used. This is a school that's located in Randolph County. Why was Asheboro City used?
So this has come up before. The actual, it relocated. So the comparability that goes through accountability is actually based on the LEA code. And so sometimes if a school relocates, they don't get a new LEA code. And so for consistency's sake, we've used comparability based on the LEA code, because otherwise we run into the case where schools relocate, or they feel like, in some cases, for example, and I'll talk about one of those schools today, the majority of the kids come from the neighboring county. But the comparability is Wake County, where the school is located, because that's where its LEA code is. So this is a topic, I think, that we've, as staffers and CSAB has certainly talked about what is the best comparability, and we've just, historically we've utilized the LEA code and where they've been originally placed, because the LEA codes don't change to my knowledge, and otherwise we would kind of run the slippery slope of schools asking for specific places of comparability, and we just don't have a policy to go by other than what we've done traditionally, which is using the LEA code.
UWARI charter is visible if you drive down 2 Point South. It's pretty clearly not in Asheboro City. It is in the county. I'm sure it draws. It's also in the county, very close to the county line of another county. I'm sure it draws from more than one location. But when it's not in Asheboro, unless this is a board policy also, which I would ask that we revisit if it is, I think it should be comparing to Randolph County data. I don't know what it does comparing to Randolph County data. If you have that, I'd be interested to know.
I think we have actually looked at that, and I can provide that before the next meeting. If I recall correctly, it actually improves their comparability, but I can look into that.
All right. Well, I would appreciate that, to be able to see that comparison as well. And I'm just going to again express concern. We've got a school that's fallen into, and I'm not saying that there aren't. That doesn't mean there can't be lots of good things that could happen, but it's gone down in terms of it hadn't met academic growth. And it's moved into the low performing category of this time period. I don't have a comfort level with a 10-year renewal for that. If we're required to do it by law, then we'll vote by law.
Well, Mr. Duncan agreed. CSAB, when having a conversation about the situation, pretty much was shut down when we saw that it's a 10-year mandatory approval, because there were concerns that were mentioned by all CSAB members about the very things that you're highlighting. And so conversation, we actually even talked about inviting them to come in and do a presentation about, plans, but there's no need for that, because at the time the discussion was it's an automatic 10-year renewal based on the legislation.
And we did confirm that with legal, but UWARI did submit a school improvement plan to our office.
It is also of note that both of those schools that we're questioning, if you look at, I think both of them are outperforming the district. UWARI, 5 percentage points higher than the district in comparability, and Tiller School in 2021 was up 6. But while they're not meeting, Tiller School in 2022 had a school performance grade of a B, which means that the students were already performing at a high level of proficiency even with COVID, and UWARI as well, even though it is a score of a D. If you look at it compared to the schools
and its immediate comparability, it's outperforming the local district, so.
But it's not in that district is my point. So that's and it may well still do that once we see the Randolph County data, but I don't know what that data is.
I understand. I think Ms. Beccaro said
They still would.
that it's still outperforming.
And I can definitely get that to you before the next meeting. But we did confirm with legal that these 10 years, if they meet the requirements, and that's how CSAB voted.
Yes. Superintendent Truitt.
I'm happy to have this conversation with anyone here or offline. But I would encourage the board to be cautious about looking at growth being met or not met, given that we have B schools that are outperforming the district but are not meeting growth, but they're already a B. And I would remind the board that year-over-year growth uses EVOS, which is the measurement that we use for teacher growth, and they really should not be the same thing, which is part of a larger conversation about our flawed school performance system, which everyone at the board table is trying to fix. But just remember that in some cases, B schools are not, and we also don't, in our accrediting of schools, it is not in board policy that they have to meet or exceed growth. We accredit schools, you can decide not to accredit a school that has not met growth, but it's not in board policy.
And I agree with the comment you just made, but I'd also point out, unfortunately, part of the statutory requirements in some of these categories include taking into account whether expectations were met or not met. So I look forward to the day when we have a much more sophisticated accountability standard to assist, and that will help all schools, I think. But given where we are right now, unfortunately, we have no choice but to take that into account to get an understanding of it. So thank you for those comments.
But just to confirm, Ms. Beccaro, the schools before us that the Charter School Advisory Board and the Office of Charter Schools are recommending meet the statutory requirements for the 10-year renewal as required.
That's correct.
So, okay to move on to the seven-year recommendations? Feel free to get any additional questions to Ms. Beccaro and her staff so that they would have adequate time to get those answers back to you before we come back together in April to decide on these schools. All right, the 7 years.
Okay, so the 10-year renewal terms are the only terms specifically outlined in statute. The statute reads that if the state board, if they do not meet those 10-year requirements, the state board may renew the charter for a period of less than 10 years or not renew the charter. The renewal guidelines that are set out in the policy, 012, uses terms of 7, 5, and 3, which is traditionally what we've recommended. For a 7-year, the guidelines state that there are no significant compliance issues the last 2 years, financially sound audits the last 2 years, and academic outcomes have been comparable at least 2 of the last 3 years or have exceeded growth 2 of the 3 years. 5 of the schools were recommended for a 7-year term. So we have Ascend Leadership Academy, Lee County, Westlake Preparatory Academy, Bonnie Cone Classical Academy, East Voyager Academy of Charlotte, and Jackson Day School. Any questions on the 7-year renewals?
Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you. And I apologize for taking time, but I understand it's important to CSAP that they hear concerns. So
that's what this time is for, so go ahead.
So if we could look at Westlake Preparatory for a moment. I noticed it's really showing one date on academic comparability, which was slightly below the district, but within the 5% margin. But on compliance, there are 2 different issues. One under IDA requirements not being met, and the second, an audit question about 1.9 compliance is nearly out of 74 issues, but it was in fact within 2 years of non-compliance issue. And so we have pretty limited data on that school at this point, and I'm wondering why we why a number of years on the renewal, less than 7, would still effectuate a proper purpose and give the school the opportunity to otherwise clean up any compliance issues and provide us with a greater or longer track record. I do note the 1 year that they met academic growth and had a C school performance grade. But in any event, I would be more comfortable with a lesser period of time. In fact, I'll just do the other one and you can respond to
Okay.
Bonnie Cone Classical Academy, it also had audit compliance issues, 4 out of the 74 categories that were reviewed in the audit of the 2021 time period. It also has not met in the 1 year for academic growth in the 1 year of data that is provided. So again, have concerns about the 7-year time period based on the fairly limited data we have. The fact that there has been a compliance issue noted in that school as well. I'll save my comments on any of the other schools here.
So for both, well, let's start with Westlake. For Westlake, and I will say for the compliance, the way we've presented it this year, we wanted to kind of give a full view to the board, and so we've gone, we've looked over the last few years, in some cases longer, if there's been a history of noncompliance for some of our, the ones we'll talk about later. If there is an issue that is still remaining or the school has been non-responsive or something like that, that is more of a red flag for us, and we note that. In this case, Westlake, they have met with EC. They actually met with EC in January of this year to talk about these are fiscal desk reviews, and I think they have to do with MOEs, just to work with them on making sure that their processes are cleaned up and they understand what they need to be doing to meet those requirements. BTSP, that's the Beginning Teacher Support Plan. They do audits periodically with all of the schools, and so we basically take note if there's anything out of the 74 indicators that are out of compliance, and then that team works with the school to, improve that, or if they have corrective actions to meet that. So in all of the cases here, there's no ongoing, non-compliance that we would say is like a pattern of non-compliance. For Westlake, I would also say that in all of these schools that are not 10 years, also presented to the CSAB, so they were able to present, data, school culture, things like that. Westlake exceeded both the state and local performance on reading and math achievement in 2022. And I think there was, John might be able to speak to this more, but I think there was also kind of a feeling for Westlake and Bonnie Cone that they opened in 2019 right before the pandemic, and although they didn't have a lot of official accountability data, they both presented data showing that their students were making growth, and Bonnie Cone exceeded the county CMS by 7% in 2020. They couldn't use that data officially, but we could look at it if they wanted us to present it, which would give them 2 years of comparable data.
And really, academics is the academic part is what pushed things towards a 7-year, because the non-compliance issues that we saw were rectifiable and they were cooperating with folks to get that done. So we felt with academics moving in a positive direction that they deserved the 7-year. That's why I think they pushed it in that direction.
Might I also add that we discussed in committee that some of the schools that had either a 1 or a 2-year delay in opening were allowed to bring data not recorded by the state to support their academic progress, unofficial academic data because obviously we didn't report, but they were able to bring.
Their presentations were stellar. I mean, they brought internal data, whether it was benchmark data or other data that they used grades or whatever. They brought pretty sound presentations for us to look at.
Any more questions about any of the 7-year renewals? Okay, so there are not any schools that have been recommended for a 5-year renewal, but there are a lot of schools recommended for a 3-year renewal. So talk us through those.
Yes, so there are 15 schools that have received a 3-year recommendation. If granted a 3-year recommendation, their charter agreement would expire in 2026, which means they would enter the next renewal cycle next year in 2024. So there's definitely a sense of urgency for a school that receives a 3-year term that we're coming back next year. There's going to be this ongoing process, and we also try to target our support for these schools. So the first one is, and we're going through these individually just because they are 3 years. Several of them are newer schools. The first one is Raleigh Oak Charter School. This is, they opened in 2018. They are a Waldorf model, and they have met growth, but they were not comparable. During their presentation, they did talk a lot about how they struggled to pivot to a online environment, especially for a model that does not use technology. If you're familiar with the Waldorf model, they do not use technology for the most part. And they are working now on improving their model to align so that students are better prepared for end-of-year testing without compromising their academic program, which is Waldorf. And then again, they were only low performing for the first year. The first time was right after the pandemic in 2021. Moore Montessori Community School. This is located in Moore County. They only had 1 year of data because they had no testing grades the first year that they opened. They're an elementary school. They were comparable to the LEA. They had a really great presentation to this CSAB. 70% of their staff have a master's degree or higher. They were also 1 point away from having a C, which would have made them non-low performing. And for their first year of testing, which was in 2021, right after the pandemic, 100% of their students passed the Read to Achieve exam. Apprentice Academy. This is a school in Union County. They're a high school. They're actually a CTE model. And they are in a 3-year because they are not comparable. They did have some federal review findings, and as of February 27th, we received a letter saying that they have taken all corrective actions and they are now compliant, so they have no compliance issues. The next one is Thomas Academy. This is the one alternative school we have in this year's cohort, so they are on an alternative model. They are located, it's a beautiful campus right next to Lake Wakima, I think is how you pronounce it. And they partner with a boys and girls home, so many of their students are transitioning in and out of protective services. And they have both local community students and residential scholars in the school. They have no compliance issues, but they are not comparable, they're low performing, which is why they have a 3-year. Veritas Community School. This school is located in Mecklenburg. They are also not comparable. They are low performing, but they have no history of compliance issues. The Institute for Developing Young Leaders. This is located in Durham County. They are not comparable, but they have been trending in the right direction. They are improving annually. They had a governance non-compliance that our office issued last year. That was because they had not submitted their beginner's teacher support plan. They corrected that within a month, and they were moved off non-compliance. They have stable leadership, and they have their presentation focused a lot on the wraparound services. They have very interesting mental health services and in-house psychiatrists, I think, or psychologists that worked with students. They offer transportation, and they provide Saturday school. They had an audit finding a year ago, nearly 2 years ago, I guess, and that has been resolved. Aristotle Prep Academy, Mecklenburg. This is a K through 8. They are not comparable, which is why they are in this 3-year term. They also are working on working with EC and with school nutrition to rectify any compliance issues, and they have no current financial issues.
Cabarrus Charter Academy, they also are not comparable, low performing. This is one of the schools, this is part of an EMO, and they met with EC in January of this year to make sure that they are working on understanding the MOE process and what they need to be doing to make sure that they're staying in compliance. And they are still working, and their federal findings, I believe, have been resolved. Classical schools, charter schools of Wilmington. This is a K through 5. It's a rather small school. They are also not comparable based on GLP, but they have been trending in the right direction. And they have a history of no compliance issues. Davidson Charter Academy, K through 8 in Lexington City. They are actually comparable. They outperformed the county the city this last year. So they're trending in the right direction, but they're a new school, and they also are getting support for their beginning teacher support program. Rocky Mound Preparatory, they are in Nash County. They have been open, I believe, since 1997, so it's one of our older schools. Low performing, but also no history of compliance issues. Paul R. Brown, this is a middle and high school in Bladen County, and they are also trending in the right direction in terms of improving for their GLP. They have a new leader. They also, they've had several site visits from our staff, and a CSAB member visited the school this year. They have presented a school improvement plan, and their entire board and a wealth of community support has appeared before CSAB as well. And this is it's a unique program. It's a military based program. The Experiential School of Greensboro, this is K through 8. They are not comparable and have no history of compliance issues. Then we have Monroe Charter Academy in Union County. This is a new school, has 1 year of data. They are not comparable. They have a financial noncompliance of disciplinary and will be on monthly allotments. And then the final school is Carolina Charter Academy. They are in Wake County. They are not comparable, although this is a school that actually has more students from the neighboring county, and they are comparable. They outperform that county. And they have no financial compliance issues. So I know that's a lot, so I'm happy to take any questions about particular schools.
Dr. Oxendine, thank you, Ms. White. Thank you so much for the thorough report. By the way, Superintendent Truitt, one of these documents for every school state. This is terrific information. Great. My question is this: the charters that are significantly in the minus can't comp with their LME or whatever formula you use to make that determination. Are they required to? Are those schools required to have in place a school improvement plan?
Yes. So any of the low-performing schools charter schools are subject to the same kind of requirements that a low-performing district or traditional school would have. They submit plans in NC STAR. Staff reviews them, gives them feedback. In addition, when we are able with our staff, we make site visits to all of the low-performing schools. And then for some of these, and this goes back to the comparability question, where we're really looking at one piece of data when we're looking at academic comparability, and it's just taking their composite score and comparing it to the district that they're located in most cases. For a lot of these schools, we do a deeper dive and we go into their EVOS data. We look at things that give us a broader picture of the school, and then those are the sort of things, if we see red flags, that we can flag for the CSAB. If we see things that are maybe, that are showing us that they're probably doing better than we suspect just looking at, a negative percentage, we bring that forward as well. So for Carolina Charter Academy, for example, they're 11 points below Wake County, but 47% of their students actually come from Harnett County. And when we compare it to that county, they're almost 10% above the county. So it's kind of data like that we really want to give a broader picture to a school, and I think harkens back to the entire question we've been having as a state, which is the current model that we use for a performance grade the accurate or the most representative of the hard work that's happening in the school? And so if we can find that data and pull it and present it to the CSAB to give them a broader context and to help them make the best possible decision, we want to do that.
Thank you very much. You do tremendous work.
And as a side note to back on that, I don't know what we do without the Office of Charter Schools giving us the information that they do to pull it together. We very much rely on their work, and they do a great job.
Thank you very much. Dr. Hall.
Madam Chair, thank you so much. I'm just curious. I'm looking at Paul Brown. 3 consecutive years.
Yep.
What are we doing to help this school? And when you talk about intervention, you mentioned that a couple of times. Is that on site? Is it online? Is it a group that goes in? Paul Brown, I'm talking about Paul Brown.
Yeah.
Help me with Paul Brown.
Yes.
Going forward.
Yeah.
What, 3 years?
So Paul Brown was interesting for us because the first time that they came to do a presentation, the school leader came, and if that guy could, I got the opinion he could probably sell ice cubes to Eskimos because he was so dynamic and passionate about what he was doing. But we were concerned because there was no one from the board there to answer any questions for us. It was him. And we felt like he may have been on an island. So we said, when you come back next time, we want to see how much your board is into this. And so after that meeting was done, I think I must have gotten 7 to 10 emails from community members. And then there was this whole section over here was their board and the school leader. And basically the charge from CSAB is that if you want this school to work, you've got to be more than just physically present. You guys are going to have to be really there for helping this school turn. And it was, a strong opinion on our end that we're going to see that if they can keep this guy there and he continues the vision that he has for that place, I hope that when they come back in the next renewal that we're able to give a 5 or 7 year, if not what he wanted, a 10. So that was what he said. But like I said, he was very passionate about what he thought he wanted to do, and we appreciated that. I mean, I think.
Commendable.
Yep.
But the fact is,
he's a new guy there.
Yeah,
too.
he's brand new.
So, yeah.
He.
Once again, I'm just trying to think.
We're with you.
And we experienced this almost the same.
Mm-hmm.
But when I saw this, I said, how in the world? But anyway, thank you but you do offer on site and.
Yeah, we do.
For those teachers.
Yep, we try to provide as much as we can.
And I know you're small.
Yeah, given capacity. The other thing we do look at with a school like Paul R. Brown, for example, that has had multiple, I think they know this is probably their last term they will be able to get if they don't make improvements. But we also try to dig a little bit deeper into the surrounding county. And a difference you'll see with this school as opposed to the 2 schools we're bringing forward for non-renewal is that if you look at the schools that these children would be going to in Bladen County, unfortunately, it's not where we would hope they would be. Paul R. Brown actually outperforms the middle school, which is also an F and not met. And Paul R. Brown actually outperforms the district schools in the Black, American Indian, 2 or more race, and the economically disadvantaged subgroups. So when you dig a little bit deeper behind that F, it paints a more detailed picture.
Superintendent Truitt, and then I'm going to keep us going.
Sorry.
We have 2 schools to discuss that.
Because, I hope I don't open a can of worms here, but because charter schools are public schools of choice, I would be very interested to know when these schools come up for renewal, what their population fluctuation is. Are they growing? Are they staying the same? Or are families leaving? Because if families are leaving, that's a whole other data point that I think this board should consider when, or if they're not leaving, if people are continuing to come, that's a sign that a school is doing something right.
And we do look into that, and it's also, if there's a drastic drop in ADM over time, that also triggers a financial noncompliance. So I totally agree. That's an important.
Okay, that's good to know. I did
Yep.
not know that. Okay.
Vice Chair Duncan.
So I have a question on a few, and I'll try to just limit it to some of them to serve as illustrations. Apprentice Academy, North Carolina, you've talked about, it's 36% below the district. And as I talked about the Randolph County situation, you said we need to stay pretty strictly within the district. So I'm trying to go to other districts outside the designated district. We need to play that the same way consistently. In terms of, it's 36% below, the only academic information we've got is not met in 2022, and it's low performing in 22. So I'm not quite sure what the criteria would be that would cause it for renewal, and it also shows under Esther monitoring 18 findings. I'm just going to go through these.
Okay.
In the interest of time. And again, there's some that I could touch on. In Aristotle Prep, we've got 3 different years well below the academic comparability. We've got compliance issues, and we have 2 years of net academic growth the last 2 years, although it appears to be in low performing status. In Cabarrus Charter, we've got 3 years of academic comparability, and it's going in the wrong direction. It's now moving 7% to 21% below the district. There are compliance issues that are listed both in EC and in ESSER monitoring. It's not met, according to this, in any of the last, since 2018, 19, or 22, the years recorded, has not met expectations, and it's been low performing. So I genuinely struggle with that. Davidson Charter meets the academic comparability issues. It doesn't meet in growth, but it has significant audit findings, 22 non-compliant out of 74. I just note that. I hope that there's very strong assurance that that has been resolved. That is of concern. That's a lot. It's basically a third of the compliance categories. Rocky Mountain Prep is outside the 5% on comparability, 7, 8, 10, and it's getting, it's going again in the wrong direction. Last year, it's happened in low performing category. It's got 1 academic growth where it met in 19. I assume you're going to tell me that that's likely the hook that's being used to say it can still be considered. But, and I think Wendell's already covered Paul L. Brown, so I will not spend any more time on that. The Monroe Charter would seem to have 1 year of data where it's 56% below academic growth was met, and had an F score in low performing. And really my question on that, is obviously we have an insufficiency of data. Why do we only have 1 year of data on that school? Because it indicates it's a first renewal for 5 years.
So several of these schools, we only have 1 year of data because they had a delay. So Monroe, for example, had a delay, which means that they essentially only get 4 years of a charter term. And then if you're opening in 2019, you've got those 2 years where you don't have data, which is why I think for a lot of these schools, which may not be where we would like them to be academically, they also are in a pretty difficult position of opening a brand new school the year that schools are shut down for the pandemic, and then only having 1 year of data, which is why we did, they came and did presentations and things like that, because, the fact of the matter is that something like Monroe Charter Academy, at this point, the options are either a 3-year and hope that we can support them and make them, help them improve, or they are closed. There's not really much in between, and I think that a lot of these recommendations are, we want to see you make that improvement. We understand that you opened at a really difficult time, and we only have 1 year of data that we're going on.
Thank you, and thank you for answering my questions. I hope the information or the questions is helpful to the board, Dr. Elvis.
Yeah, and Mr. Duncan, I think also we took into account, as she just said, with myself personally, my school, and the effects of what we went through with shutting down and then trying to get started back up again. We experienced losses that we didn't enjoy. So opening up a new school in the midst of that, I think we tried to take that into account, and as she said, trying to support them and get them to where they need to be, but we also made it pretty clear after each presentation that, we have to see improvement. And so it's not something that can continue to be ongoing. That's why you have 3 years, starting with this year's data to get things turned around.
And just before we move on to the schools that are before us for non-renewal, the 3-year is the absolute flashing caution light. And a reminder to colleagues that with that 3-year renewal, after the first year, they begin again the investigative and the reporting and the paperwork required for them to go through that 2-year renewal process. They are under a lot of scrutiny. And so for these schools, it is the get your act together, right? So it's a warning to them that the lens of scrutiny and investigation is upon you. Moving to the schools that are in the non-renewal recommendations, and rarely do we find ourselves, and so I am sure that you have a good finding to place those schools before us for discussion today.
Yes, so there is the renewal guidelines outline what we usually see for a case of non-renewal. It might not be all of these, but at least some of these. One is a current and persistent pattern of compliance issues. One is financially unsound audits the last 2 of the immediately preceding 3 years. Academic outcomes have not been comparable to the local LEA, and they are usually continually low performing. Statute does allow the state board to terminate or not renew any charter upon the following grounds: failure to meet requirements for student performance, failure to meet generally accepted standards of fiscal management, violations of law, material violation of any conditions, standards, or procedures set forth in the charter, 2/3 of faculty and staff requesting that the charter be terminated, or other good cause identified. So this year we have 2 schools. There also is, I will say, there is a clause in the statute which states that if a charter school has met growth in each of the immediately preceding 3 years, that it shall not be renewed just based on low performance. But neither of the schools here today would trigger that clause. So the first school is Zeka School of the Arts and Technology. This school opened in 2013, so this is one of our final schools that received a original 10-year charter, meaning this is their first renewal term. They are not comparable to the LEA. They have not had compliance issues, but they have had a history of financial issues, mainly related to ADM. So if you look at the ADM in 2020, they had 155, so it's a small school to begin with, and it's reduced, and over the last 2 years, they've dropped to just over 100 students. They have been I believe, an F school its entire history, and their growth status has kind of gone from met to not met. It's yo-yoed a little bit. This school did come to in front of the CSAB just like any school not receiving a 10. I'll let John speak to it a little bit, but there were definitely some differences between this school and other schools that we saw that were low performing.
So if you ask the difference between Paul R. Brown and Zeka, if you looked at data alone, the difference was a vision for how we can improve one, and no vision for what it's, people are happy, they're gonna come to school, we're a good place, versus this is what we're gonna do to turn ourselves around, and it was the complete opposite.
We also provide, if there's a case of a possible non-renewal, we provide additional data, and we do look at the surrounding schools. And we spoke about Paul R. Brown, how the schools that Paul R. Brown was actually outperforming a lot of the surrounding schools. In the case of Zecca, that's not the case. The two closest elementary and middle schools are outperforming the schools sometimes by like twice. The GLP, they also are C and D schools. There's no F schools surrounding the general area where Zecca is located. So that was also taken into account as well. And then the finances, over time their finances have improved, but the ADM is definitely a concern that if it continues to drop, that always puts a school financially at risk. So you have the reasons here that would have aligned with statute for a non-renewal. The second school is Eastside Stream Academy. This is a school in Mecklenburg County, and this school was not originally placed on the non-renewal possibilities, but I think is a good indication of how the renewal process can work well in terms of doing some additional investigations and kind of reviewing of a school. And they are not comparable, but they also have a history of noncompliance and a history of financial noncompliance. I will say that they were removed this year from financial noncompliance, but prior to that, they had, from 2018, they had been on disciplinary status. They also had a fiscal year 22 finding in their audit, which stated that there were significant adjustments required in order for the financial statements to be materially correct. They have been continually low performing, and in 10 years of operations, they opened in 2013, they've had over, I believe, 11 leaders. So there has been a consistent pattern of not being able to keep a leader. I have actually done several site visits to the school and did present to the CSAB recommendations that have been made over year after year that are the same recommendations, and we've seen no progress with those recommendations, including trying to stabilize a leader. And we've also had a lot of staff come to us anonymously stating that they just find the environment to not be a good place to work, which is probably why you've seen 11 leaders in 10 years.
And the difference for this school, obviously, is if you look back at the notes in the program, unresponsive. They're just unresponsive to the recommendations that are given to them, deadlines to turn things in. It seemed to be there was a reason for why things could never get done, and it just didn't feel like there was a plan for what was going to be there to fix anything. So that being said, and the history of the school and its performance, it was the recommendation that CSAP thought was appropriate.
Ashley, how do you explain the continued growth in the enrollment? Just selling?
Well, I think a big factor in that is that they built a new building, and the building had, it's a beautiful building. They have a brand new building. It's in a location that, doesn't have a lot of other options. So I think that has a lot to do with it. Yeah.
Yep. Leadership matters. Okay, so those two are before us for non-renewal. Again, something that this board takes very seriously. Thank you for doing the due diligence work to get these in front of us. So there are two schools in our packet who have yet to be interviewed, or several last interviews with CSAB at this month's meeting. You'll be back before us next month with a recommendation for those, and they are
Next Generation Academy and Invest Collegiate Transform. So they just have some further reviews, mainly in the financial by school business, that need to take place so that we can give you the best up-to-date information. Any questions?
I have just a quick question.
Well, yes, sir.
First of all, I admire you for the job you do, because, especially with the comparisons, because you're dealing with things have different elements to them, and you're still trying to compare them. But you made mention that you had some teachers or employees that were not happy at some of the lower performing or ones you're considering for non-renewal. How, is that ordinary to get to talk with the employees? Is that part of the process? Or is it kind of an exception?
I would say I've been in the office now 5 years, and I will say that we've seen more of that. I don't know if it's just because there's maybe they have more knowledge of our office, but we do get, someone that works in a charter school, they can't necessarily go to like they don't go to the local board, so oftentimes they come to our office. And we have seen over the last couple of years with schools that are struggling in some regard, oftentimes it's staff that will call us and kind of say, hey, this doesn't seem right, or send us resignation letters so they can see what how they resign. Like it's not all the time, but it does happen.
The reason I agree with Ms. Truitt that increase in student population or decrease in student population, or the turnover of not only the leaders but the teachers and other employees, things that you can look at that are independent to the school, not a comparison, to me are strong indicators, because I would find it difficult to compare when things are so different. But
absolutely.
But I do and admire the job being done to make sure that the children in those schools, just like the other traditional public schools, are getting a good education, and that's to me what's important.
Great.
Well, I really appreciate, Treasurer Follow.
Thank you. I don't know you very well, but yesterday I was in Winston-Salem for Senator Jim Broyhill's funeral, and it's funny when you're back in your hometown, a lot of things come to mind. I just want to mention some things to you that maybe will help you given the previous comment. Governor Martin spoke yesterday, and he's always said doing right's rarely wrong. And the blood that runs through me is Quaker, and one of the spices of that is to be fair and just. And as far as your department is concerned, even though you might tell people no, if you always spell it K-N-O-W, and a fair is not something that comes to Raleigh once a year. A fair is something you do every day in your department, so I wanted to applaud you for that.
Thank you.
As I was leaving yesterday, I went by Maya Angelou's house, who always tells us that when a person shows you who they are the first time, you should believe them. And unfortunately, some of these institutions have told you and showed you who they are the first time, and there's really not much redemption there. And lastly, just start out like you're going to hold out, when it comes to being fair and consistent. And so I know these are difficult. I know that you don't like letting people down, but it seems to me that your temperament is such that you're letting people down at a pace they can tolerate.
Right.
And
trying.
That's a compliment. So
thank you.
Thank you for doing that.
I'll just put the exclamation point on that. No better summary than that. If no additional questions from colleagues, thank you for your time. Thank you especially for the compilation of these materials. They're incredibly helpful for us. And I know that was time consuming and by the number of pages costly as well.
Right.
So we appreciate that. Mr. Chair, we are concluding the EICS committee work for the day. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ms. White.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
Appreciate it. Before we break for lunch, I'd like to recognize another one of our local superintendents that inadvertently did not. From Alexandria County, Superintendent Jennifer Hefner. Superintendent Hefner, welcome. We'll now break for lunch and return at 1 p.m. 1 p.m.